Hello, everyone, and welcome, and happy Valentine's Day. Thank you so much for spending it here on my channel, or at least part of it. I won't keep you for very long. Today, I want to share with you yet another coloring in my brand new book called It's Easy to Color. I selected my lovely flower girl for our model today, and I am focusing specifically on silk and roses. Very romantic, very delicate, lots of red, lots of magenta, lots of pink, but also lots of surprises in terms of color and technique. Here are the things that we're going to cover today. First, we'll talk about the actual color palette. All is not as it seems, my friends. We will talk about actual pencils used versus the colors perceived. I will do a brief overview of how I colored the hair simply because it's also silky and part of this whole look and texture, but I'm not going to go in depth on the hair. What I want to focus on more is the dress. The dress is actually silk, and while doing the demo on the dress effect with colored pencils, I will talk about some unusual layering, different color choices, and textures, not just textures perceived, but also physical textures in real life that we're dealing with on the surface of the paper. And for the grand finale, we will, of course, do all of the roses, not all in real time. Of course, this entire project took nearly 5 hours to complete, but I will do a demo on the roses showing two different ways of coloring them. One, the traditional way with colored pencils. And for number two, I am conducting yet another experiment on this Amazon paper. We will be coloring half of the roses in acrylic paint directly on the paper. That's right. In my last video on crystals, I did a really thick layer of acrylic paint, but as some of you pointed out in the video comments, I did all of that acrylic paint over the layers of wax colored pencils. So while the paper did take a lot of layers, we didn't actually apply paint and water directly to the paper. That is true. That is one of the ways of applying acrylic paint to paper to keep it safe. But you guys want me to push this paper even further, so today I will. Today I will paint these roses directly on this Amazon paper, which some of you still don't believe in, using water, and we'll see how the paper holds up. This is pushing it even further than anything we've done before. If you're just tuning in, or if this is your first episode on my show, we are working in my brand new published book called It's Easy to Color. The book comes in two versions, a PDF download for those of you who prefer to print on your own paper, or to print multiple copies of each page so that you can practice several times, practice several effects. And it comes in a bound printed version, which is available on Amazon, which of course opened a whole can of worms with those of you out there who are still not accustomed to Amazon paper. I set out on this project to color every single page in this physical book, which by the way has 50 pages, and to do it all in different styles, in different colors, in different moods, and using different media. So far I've been using colored pencils, acrylic paint, and markers to test this paper. So today we'll continue doing that and chatting about it. Speaking of chatting, if you caught this video live as a premiere, please say hello in the chat. We have a chat going. There's probably a question or a poll or something else going on in the live chat as well. Please do pop in and join the conversation. If you're watching this as a regular video, please feel free to drop me a comment below. Don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel if you like this content. So without further ado, let's jump right into our coloring and all of our experiments. First things first, the colors. On the left, you can see the final outcome of my flower girl after 4.5 or 5 hours of work using colored pencils and acrylic paint on this cream Amazon paper. And what you're seeing on the right are the actual pencils. I used 12 different pencils for this coloring. I selected a baby blue, a teal, a nice middle violet, a darker bluish purple violet, a deep magenta, black, cream, a rosy beige color, dusty pink, an orangey red, a pure clean red, and a different kind of a dark maroon red. Additionally, I will be using white charcoal and a white Prismacolor. So these are the pencils. What do you notice? What jumps out at you on the screen right now? Looking at the picture on the left and seeing these colors on the right, they're kind of mismatched, aren't they? There isn't a lot of that blue and teal and purple on the actual picture. And even the reds that you see on the right side of my palette aren't really that way on the coloring itself. Why is that? Well, let's take a look at the colors the way that we perceive them. Now, this looks a lot more like the actual color palette for this drawing, doesn't it? The colors on this chart represent what we perceive. So on this chart, going from the top left to the bottom right in order of appearance, in order of importance, in order of magnitude, we have a more purplish magenta. We have a very specific red, different types of pinks and creams and blush colors, and moving on with a little bit of not so black, but a really deep, dark purple, like a very deep wine color. More muted purples and teals, and a little bit of pale lavender. This looks like it actually matches what we see, yet those are not the pencils that we used. So again, coming back to the idea of if you want to achieve this effect, it's not at all about matching the exact tools. It's about the way that you use them, which is of course what this show is all about. So looking at these two palettes side by side, on the left we have pencils used, and on the right we have colors perceived. Very different, very, very different. Just because you're trying to match a certain effect doesn't mean that you need to match the exact pencils. So having seen that, let's take a look at how I take the pencils in the chart on the left and turn them into pigments that we perceive on the right. For my very first step on this, I will do some priming with white charcoal. For those of you new to the show, white charcoal is a tool that I use a lot, especially on toned paper. Now, this paper is very lightly toned. It's light cream. When working on loose leaf, I prefer to work on cardstock and in different vibrant colors. I love working on pink, on lavender, on different coffee and mocha colors. There's some really delicious selection with a 65-pound cardstock paper. I'm going to drop links to everything that you guys need in the video description, or I might actually just, you know what, I'm actually just going to drop a single link to my storefront, my Amazon storefront, which is where I recommend materials that I've actually tested and used. So if you want to check out the exact tools that I use and the tools that I recommend, swing by that link and check out the materials that I've actually test driven. For those of you who don't know what white charcoal is, or for those of you who do know and just don't like working with it, you can complete this step with white Prismacolor. But for our silk effect, I do recommend that you don't skip this step. So whether you're working in my actual physical book on the screen paper, or if you're working on a PDF printout on your own paper, do take a moment to complete this step with the white primer. So what am I priming here? I primed the hair. I'm going to prime the dress and some of the roses. I'm going to experiment with the roses. So I'm going to do, actually I said 2 effects, but I'm going to do 3 effects on the roses. The roses that are around her chest, I will do with the white primer and colored pencils. The big rose that's off her hip on the left side of the page, I'm going to do without a primer, but with colored pencils. And the roses that are hugging her left hip on the right side of our page, the frontal big roses, I'm going to do entirely with acrylic paint and water directly on this paper. So notice what's happening on the screen, what's happening to our paper as I'm priming it with white charcoal. There's a really cool underlying bluish effect that's happening. And that's exactly what we want for this. Going back to our color palette, notice that while everything is very strongly in the reds, magentas, and pinks, there is a touch of that teal. That teal is there for balance. If everything was 100% in the pink realm, it would be a little bit heavy on the eye, a little bit overwhelming. So that touch of teal, that drop of an opposite color, is there to balance us visually, to make it a little bit more attractive, a little bit more realistic to look at. All of that stuff, how to bring in that extra color to balance things out, is what I teach in my main course in the academy called How to Use Colored Pencils Like a Pro. Again, if you're just strolling into this channel, if you're brand new here, I highly recommend that when you go to the academy, which is 100% free to join for everyone, that the first course that you take is how to use colored pencils like a pro if you are indeed a colorist and are interested in professional effects, and also in how to make your own decisions, how to choose those colors. A lot of colorists out there have incredible artistic potential, but many people struggle with that decision making. How do I know which colors to pick if I'm not copying an exact image? Colored Pencils Like a Pro is the course for you. For those of you who are interested in seeing the full uncut versions of my colorings, again, these are usually 4 or 5 hour recordings. I share them in 2 places. My patrons of the Coloring Club tier get a monthly full coloring with every single colored pencil called out. So if that's you, if you want to see the full recording and actually get the name of every single tool, then swing by Patreon and join the Coloring Club. This month, in February of 2024, in the Coloring Club, I am sharing my full-length video of the Heart of Gold with the iridescent beetle effect. So that's happening right now. If you haven't joined the Coloring Club yet, now is a great time to join. This full recording is already up for everyone who is my channel member. So again, if you are a member, not a subscriber, but an actual registered member of my YouTube channel, this full video is already up there for you. If you're not a member already, please do consider joining. There's a big, huge, fat join button under this video. There's probably a direct link in the video description as well. Channel members help me a great deal to stay afloat and to keep producing this content for you guys. So those of you who are already supporting this channel, either by means of being a member or a patron over on Patreon, I thank you dearly. You guys make this content possible for everyone else. Otherwise, I just wouldn't be able to produce so much free content for the world. For those of you interested in hair effects, the reason that I'm skipping through this so quickly, well, obviously because I want to move on to the dress and the roses, because that's like the title of the show, Silk and Roses. The other reason is that I teach hair in depth on Skillshare. Popping up on the screen is a QR code for my course on how to color hair on Skillshare, and a general QR code for my Skillshare account. Do scan that or use the direct link that's in the video description to join me on Skillshare. On Skillshare, you can learn from me for free. So do check it out if you're interested in this kind of a silky hair effect. I teach many different hair types and colors on 5 different models in that course. It's a very involved course. But one of the models, my cherry bomb, is very similar to this effect. So all the steps are the same, it's just that the colors are a little bit different. Thing about Skillshare, it's very important that you guys use the actual links that I'm sharing with you when finding me on Skillshare rather than using the search option. The links that I'm sharing with you are referral links. So if you use those, I actually get a shiny penny eventually at some point. If you don't use them, I don't get anything. Join the course. It's completely free for you guys on Skillshare. And I do recommend that if you're new to Skillshare and you enjoy my course, do also browse the platform. It's huge. There are thousands of other creators there teaching thousands of other effects. So do consider actually subscribing to Skillshare for a few months or a year. I myself am a member and I take courses from other creators on Skillshare. Obviously not on drawing and coloring, but on other things that I am learning, like video editing and filmmaking. Alrighty. After I added all of my colors in my blending, I came back in with pure black to add my contrast on the hair. And that's my silky hair effect. Very basic, but lots and lots of layers. Now for the dress, finally, we're getting into the meat of this program. I am starting with my baby blue. How crazy is that? Again, look at the final version of this. Her dress is clearly this beautiful magenta silk, yet I'm starting with this baby blue. That is insane. Why am I doing that? That's because of all of my pre-selected colors. This is one of the colors from my original chart. This is my baby blue. Way before I even picked up a pencil and started coloring anything on this page, I had all 12 of my pencils already pre-selected and set next to my drawing board so that I'm not distracted by any other colors. I'm not distracted by any other effects. I am locked into my color selection, and that will guide me for the rest of the project. After the layer of my baby blue, I'm coming in with teal and I'm building up my layers. I'm not using a lot of pressure, especially if you did the priming with white charcoal. It's very important not to use a great deal of pressure. White charcoal is not everyone's cup of tea for priming. It may be a little bit tricky to work with. Some of you will find it challenging, some of you will find it frustrating, others will love it. I don't know which category you fall into, so I highly recommend that you try it and see if you like it. For some people, the white charcoal is great because it slows down the rate of our layering a little bit. So if you are heavy-handed, if you know that layering 5 or 6 or 7 colors is challenging for you, that your first layer is just too strong, your second layer is too strong, by the third layer you're digging holes in your page, then priming it with white charcoal is actually really good because it will slow down that intensity of your shading just a little bit. I'm adding my purple now, my mid-tone lavender purple, and seeing the pencil in my hand, you can imagine that it's easy to go overboard with a pencil like this. It's not a light purple. This is a nice mid-tone. It would be very easy to apply it heavily. However, that entire white charcoal primer is allowing me to really glide on the surface of the page. The thing that the white charcoal also does, aside from, of course, changing the color of the page from cream to white, is that it creates a slightly glossy texture over the tooth of the paper that we have right now. Now, I'm hesitant to use that word glossy because it's actually not the kind of texture that we want for coloring. Glossy is not desirable. So don't think of it in terms of like photo paper glossy. It's definitely not that, but it's a little bit, smooth. It's like instead of feeling the tooth of the paper, it's like you are ice skating now with the tip of your pencil. You really have to feel it to understand what I'm talking about. I'm now about 45 minutes into the coloring of this dress, and my primer with cool colors is done. I did a layer of white charcoal, baby blue, teal, mid-tone violet, and a dark purple. That's 4 layers of pigment just on this dress, and only now am I coming in with my red, bravely coloring over everything that I've already established. This kind of an undertone, the cool undertone under my reds, is what's going to create that perceived magenta color that we saw in the color chart in the beginning of the show. For those of you just tuning in, thank you so much for joining. This is a live premiere. Hopefully, you're actually catching it live. If not, thank you for tuning in anyway and enjoying this regular video recording. If you are enjoying the show, please don't forget those thumbs up. If you're here live, join us in the chat. We're having a blast in the live chat right now. If you're able, please drop me a super chat. It's Valentine's Day. Tell me you love me. I love you guys. I love teaching you guys and sharing all this work with you. I'm spending my Valentine's Day with you, and thank you so much for spending yours with me. Remember that channel members already have their Valentine's Day waiting for them. all of my channel members have this complete full 4.5 hour recording with nothing cut out, step by step in real time, already waiting for them. After adding a whole bunch of red, I am bringing in my white Prismacolor pencil, which I'm using as a blender here. A lot of beginner colorists are confused by the fact that a white pencil doesn't actually produce white pigment when added over other colors. That is simply the nature of the tool. Colored pencils don't really work that way. Now, Prismacolor is unique in that lighter colors do layer over darker ones, but only ever so slightly. You can't expect pure white pigment layered over this very strong red, this very strong burgundy. However, all of these pencils being wax pencils, the lighter colors are excellent for using as lighteners and blenders. So you can see that I can add a little bit of that silk effect, those little reflections that you would see on silk. I can add those with my white Prismacolor, and I can also create smoother gradient transitions by using it as a blender on that lighter part of her belly. Now, at this stage, I thought I was done with the dress, so I moved on to the roses around her chest. However, spoiler alert, we will come back to the dress and do a little bit more work on it later on. For the roses, there are 3 clusters of roses. We have one around her chest, one that's kind of hidden behind her, and one on the front. The ones that are around her chest right now, we've primed with white charcoal, which achieved 2 things. The white charcoal created a slightly bluish undertone, which is great for our color palette because remember, we have lots of pinks, lots of reds, lots of purples, but also a splash of that blue and a splash of that turquoise. So establishing that right from the start is good for us. The other thing that it did is it lightened the outlines just a little bit, which is also great for the roses. Now, I'm really into thick outlines these days, but selectively. So I want fewer outlines on the petals of the roses. But once everything's said and done and colored completely, I would like to outline each rose individually. Using outlines and specifically using line variation is something that I teach in my Make Your Own Coloring Page course. For those of you who are interested in the drawing aspect of the coloring world, if you would like to try your hand at actually creating your own line art, which I highly recommend because understanding how line art is made, how it's constructed, even if you never take it any further to the point of setting up your own shop and selling your coloring pages, even if you do it just for practice, just for the learning experience, I found that those who have completed my Make Your Own Coloring Page course have greatly improved their coloring skills as well. It's like you get to see behind the curtain. You get to be the magician for a change. You create the art, you understand where these lines are coming from, and all of a sudden your ability to color them changes quite dramatically. So do check out that course as well. Remember that all of the courses in my It's Easy to Draw Academy are available on various payment plans, so you can stretch it out over 3 months or even 6 months. Additionally, there are free previews on every single course, so if you're unsure, if you want to get a little taste of what you will be learning and make sure that it's for you and it's the right time for you, I invite you to take as many free preview courses as are available before making your decision. So on the roses here, our first layer is white charcoal. Our second layer is pale pink. Our third layer is an orangey red. And now with our fourth layer, I am coming in with a more pinkish red. Lots and lots of layering on these roses. Notice that I treat these roses more as spheres rather than a collection of individual petals. There is some color gradient variation petal to petal, but generally I am keeping consistent lighting and consistent shading on each rose as if it was just a ball of petals rather than trying to color one petal at a time. And now I'm coming in with burgundy. Notice that I'm sculpting the whole thing at once. I'm sculpting the roses with a little bit more definition with this deep burgundy to add a little bit of a higher contrast. And as I'm sculpting the roses, I'm also adjusting some of the shadows on the dress. And here comes my teal. These are my little tiny teal highlights, the little accent to balance everything. Some of them are going over blank paper, but some of them are going over that orangey red shading that I've already established on some of the leaves. And it's that layering of our different colors that creates the new pigments. Going back to the beginning of the show, remember we looked at the colors used versus the colors perceived. This is how the colors perceived happen. Now, do you know from the very start if that's how the colors perceived will turn out? Not always. Not always. The ultimate question is, the most common question is, but how do I know? How do I know what's the formula if I want this to turn out to be this exact teal against this exact orange? What's the formula of pencils? And that's not how art works. That's not how coloring works. There is no formula of use this number pencil, then layer with this other number pencil. It's not physically possible to structure it that way. It's just not feasible because of the art nature of it. It has to be organic. It has to come from your heart. You have to trust your gut feeling. There is a lot of intuition and a lot of trust in coloring. And I think many of the issues that beginner colorists struggle with is that they try to make the process of coloring too mechanical, too systematic, relying too much on specific formulas. So again, if you would like to take your coloring to the next level, if you would like to acquire that level of natural coloring, of that level of confidence in selecting your own colors and trusting yourself, that is actually based on science and numbers and colors and how they work, then do consider taking my How to Use Colored Pencils Like a Pro course in the Academy. Again, go through all the free preview lessons before you decide anything, and then, pick a payment plan and jump in. There's no time limit on these courses. Take as long as you want. You may have noticed that I came in with some pure black there to increase my contrast to make sure that there's a clear division between the dress and the roses. And now I'm bringing in more vibrant reds. The tricky part of working with a limited color palette like this, and this is a very limited color palette, like everything is just in this magenta tone. The tricky part of working with a limited palette like this is defining the separate elements. Her dress, her hair, and her roses are pretty much the same color. So how do we differentiate one element from another? Usually in my courses, for instance, in my How to Use Colored Pencils Like a Pro course, I would teach you to select different colors or even to follow a specific color combo that's already proven by time and history to separate these elements. For instance, we could have done yellow roses on the background of a teal dress, but not here. Here we can't use color to separate the elements because we've already decided that pretty much everything is the same color. So we have to use contrast. Notice that our contrast is extremely high here. We have pure black and we have pure white. That is the highest possible contrast that we can achieve. Contrast is extremely important for defining our elements, but it's also extremely important for the silk texture. Silk, by definition, is very high contrast, but also very smooth. So that takes us back to gradient transition. It's a whole other chapter in the Pencils Pro course is gradient transitions, specifically differentiating between gradual gradient transitions and sharp gradient transitions. Silk textures generally exhibit gradual gradient transitions, and that's what gives it that silky look. And speaking of textures, I actually have an entire course called Textures. There's a little bit of silk in there as well. In the Textures course, it's actually a mini course. You can finish that one very quickly. But it covers like 24 different textures or something like that, including silk ribbons and porcelain and just all sorts of really cool textures that are shiny or pearlescent. So, don't wait for me to call out these courses as they come up. Just swing by the main Academy page and see what else is up there. I think we have 12 courses up there right now, plus bundles. So there's a lot for everyone to choose from for both drawing and coloring. And if there is a sale happening, which there is still today, then that will be on the front page to give you the actual coupon code and to give you the countdown to how many days and hours are left in the sale. So that's always on the front page of the Academy. Moving on to our second rose effect, the rose here on the left. I did not do any white priming on this rose at all. I am starting directly on my blank naked page, which is cream, with this orangey red. And I'm doing an entire underpainting layer with this orangey red, establishing shading on the individual petals while keeping the entire rose bulb structure in mind. This rose is much bigger and offers a lot more detail on individual petals, so there's a lot more to play with here. If you're just tuning in, if you caught us live, please do jump into the live chat and say hello. Please consider dropping me a super chat. It's Valentine's Day. I will take all the treats that you have to offer. Also, consider becoming a channel member. All of my channel members are getting this full recording, the full 4.5 hours of it. It is up already for those. So just hit the big join button, become a channel member. Those of you who are already channel members, your names are showing up in green in the live chat. I can see you guys right away. And you get various badges for the length of time that you spend as a member. Some of you are already dinosaurs, and that is way cool. Thank you guys so much for supporting this channel. Now that the orangey red layer is done, I am coming in with pink, just a basic mid-tone pink, not a bubblegum pink or Barbie pink, maybe a bit on the dusty rose side, but really just a generic mid-tone pink that's not too hard on the eyes. And notice that while I'm doing petal by petal coloring, I am also crossing over my lines as much as possible so that I can cover as much of those lines as possible. We're not going for full realism here. We're not going for hyper realism here. So I'm not going to try to completely hide the outlines. In fact, once everything's finished, I'm going to give each flower an individual overall big thick outline because of the style of this illustration. So don't worry about making the outlines disappear completely, but hiding them a little bit is always a desirable effect for flowers because flowers are so delicate. We don't really want those thick outlines on the petals in the middle of the flower. Coming in with my pure deep lipstick red, this is such a delicious effect. I like layering my reds over pinks to make them even deeper, even smoother. It's almost like I'm adding this blush to my rose. It's a very, very romantic look, I find. Very cool. And still working with all of the pencils that I've pre-selected. I'm not introducing anything new. If you missed the beginning of the show, please do replay it to see my color palettes of the actual pencils that I selected for this project versus the colors that we perceive on the finished version of this coloring. So you see that I did 3 main layers on this rose, the orangey color, the pink color, and the red color, and then the rest of it was all coming in with little bits and bites of my white, of my cream, of my teal, not really systematically, but just coming in wherever it's needed to match that vision that I have in my head. The way to control that, the way to keep yourself from getting carried away with other pencils is to pre-select all of the pencils that you will use for a given project and not get seduced by anything else along the way. Seeing how the roses turned out, I am now coming in with all of the same colors, but just increasing the saturation and increasing the contrast on that dress. Always be open to going over the areas that you've already completed because things change as you add more elements to your coloring. The overall look of it changes. So don't get stuck on the effects that are already finished. If your dress is finished, but all of a sudden adding that rose changes the look of the dress, by all means, come back to it and keep editing. Now, the secret to being able to do that is to color with light pressure, but a lot of layers. I'm looking at my timestamp right now. I'm approaching a 3-hour mark. So beautiful effects do take time. They do take care. Don't rush this. And I'm going to add just a few highlights here with my white acrylic paint. We've already seen how to do that in the crystals video. But here comes the scary, super experimental part, Never before done on this show. I don't know if it's ever been done by anyone on Amazon paper, but here we go. We're going to use acrylic paint and water directly on the page. Now, to demonstrate to you that I'm actually using acrylic paint and that I'm actually using water, I'm going to take my book off my regular drawing stand. I'm going to place it horizontally on my tabletop, and you guys get to see the mess that my drawing desk actually is. This is what my room looks like. So, full disclosure, because we're working with paint and water, it's especially important to have that protective paper underneath our page. So make sure you have that. And here we go. Brush and water, brush and paint. And I'm going to start a little bit timidly. I'm just going to test the waters, so to speak, and just prime a few of the petals with white to make sure that the paper is handling it. Again, this is directly on Amazon paper. There's no primer, there's no white charcoal on these flowers, there's no Prismacolor pencil, there's nothing. It's just the naked page, the actual Amazon printer page. And I'm applying my paint with water exactly like I would paint on canvas to this paper. To be honest with you guys, at this point, I am completely terrified. I just spent nearly 4 hours on this coloring, probably beyond 4 hours actually at this point, which stretched over several days. I am very attached to this coloring. It's looking beautiful. I'm extremely happy with it. There's the pressure of having to finish it before this premiere to actually share it with you guys. And I am doing this experiment directly on my coloring page. In retrospect, I should have probably tested this on a different page, perhaps on one of the empty back pages or in one of the other versions of the book that I have. But no, I didn't think that far ahead. I just jumped right in and said, you know what? Whatever happens, happens. Let's see, and we'll have it on camera. And if it fails miserably, I'll share that with you guys as well and tell you don't do this. But that didn't happen. Everything actually went very smoothly. The painting worked. And you can see that as time goes on, as I'm moving further and further into these roses, I get braver and braver, both with my colors and also with my layering. I'm now taking bigger blobs of paint that I'm applying to this page, and I will be dipping my brush in water more and more. Notice that I'm using just the same brush. I've had requests. The other reason that I'm showing you this full screen with my very embarrassingly messy desk is that I've had many requests from you guys to show a little bit more of the behind the scenes, a little bit more of where does my hand go when it goes off screen? How much paint am I picking off with my brush? How often do I clean my brush? So this is for you guys. This is for all of you who have been asking for that. My palette, of course, is a very sophisticated art tool called paper. This is just a piece of print paper that I folded in half and I squeezed out my paint samples on that. So you don't have to invest into a lot of materials, into a lot of tools to be able to paint with acrylic paint. All you need is the actual acrylic paint, a brush or two, and some water, and that's it. And these are turning out beautifully. Again, if you guys want to see the full recording of this without anything cut out, without anything sped up, if you want to see just the raw, uncut footage, all 4.5 hours of this, that's already up for all of my channel members. To become a channel member, simply hit that join button and pick a tier. Because it's Valentine's Day, I'm sharing this video with all of my tier members, even the baby sharks. Normally, though, these extended videos are just for my top supporters. At this point, I am going crazy. I am now layering freely. I'm treating this as just a piece of canvas, and I am pushing my boundaries as much as I humanly can. I'm adding very thick brush strokes. I'm adding a lot of strokes, overstrokes, lots and lots of layering, and quite a bit of water. Quite a bit of water. I am not even trying to protect this paper in any way. I see that there's no immediate wrinkling that's happening. The paper is reacting a little bit to the water. Obviously, you know, it's not waterproof. If you dip this book in a bathtub, it's going to be ruined. And so there are limits to how much water you can dump on this page. But with this just natural amount of water that goes with my acrylic painting style, I am seeing no pushback from the paper. It's still holding up, it's still good. But on this big rose, I pushed my boundaries very heavily. I've layered a lot more than I expected to. And specifically for the purposes of this experiment, I want to show you guys the ultimate level to which you can push this paper and still have it hold up. And once the acrylic paint work is done and dry, which doesn't take long, but do wait like 60 seconds or something like that to let everything set. Now that it's done, I'm coming in with my burgundy pencil to give my flowers that thick outline that I was talking about in the beginning of the show. And that to me is just such a cool stylistic decision. It's just such a cool look. It's a little bit game designy, a little bit cartoony, like mixing that realism with a thick outline. I really like that look. And you can see that pencils over acrylic paint also work. Not as well as the other way around, but if something needs to be adjusted with a pencil, you can do it. And ta-da! It is done. The moment of truth. Let's take a look. Let's see how it held up. We'll turn the page, we'll remove our protective papers, and we'll take a look at the back. You can see that there is a little bit of a wrinkling, very, very slight wrinkling on the page where I used the acrylic paint, but not a lot. I don't think this is significant. On the front of the page where the actual painting is done, there is no visible wrinkling. There is no distortion at all. As I'm turning the page now, I like to bend the page like that so that you guys can see the reflection and also how straight and flat the page actually is. So the page isn't curled, it's not warped in any way whatsoever. Looking at the back of the page, we can guess that something was done to the front of it, but there's no color bleed through. There's no actual warping of the page whatsoever. It's quite incredible. And again, this is acrylic paint with water directly on this Amazon print paper. So for those of you who are still doubting the quality of this paper, check out this video, check out the other videos that I've done in this book already, and give it a shot. I'm popping up the links to the book all the time throughout the show. The direct links to the book are in the video description. If you have not yet had a good experience of coloring in an Amazon print, perhaps you weren't armed with all the knowledge and all the tools for doing it correctly. That's why I'm here, and that's why I'm doing all of these demos to show you that there is a better way to color on these books, to use this paper to its full potential. I feel that a lot of people who scream that this paper is bad are people who don't know all the coloring tricks. And that's perfectly fine. It's easy to color on cardstock. It's easy to color on really thick paper. And just because the paper is thin, a lot of people automatically assume that it's poor quality. But paper thickness does not directly correlate to paper quality. As you can see, everything's out on the table. Full disclosure, I show you guys exactly how I work. I show you exactly the tools that I work with. And we were able to produce this amazing, beautiful result. So if I can do it, you can do it as well. That's why I'm here. I'm here to share with you all of my secrets. I'm here to teach you guys. If you enjoyed the show, please give it a thumbs up. Subscribe to this channel for more content like this. Remember to become a channel member to grab the full recording of this project. This is your last chance to give me a super chat and say Happy Valentine's Day. I love you guys as well. And do swing by the Academy and consider joining a course. Happy Valentine's Day, and I'll see you in the next video.